mastering the art of precision shooting isn't just about pulling the trigger, it's about discipline and training and relentless pursuit of perfection. It's the difference between successful harvest and a missed opportunity. And few understand this better than Jason. As an Army Ranger, Jason operated at the highest level of combat readiness, where every shot counted and every mission demanded absolute precision. He learned firsthand the success isn't luck, it's preparation, skill, and the right tools in the right hands. Today, he brings that elite mindset to the world of hunting and long-range shooting, helping outfitters, hunters, and veterans to take their skill to the next level. Through Article 4 Rifle Works, Jason is revolutionizing the way serious shooters approach their craft. And if you're an outfitter looking to give your clients an ultimate edge, or a hunter wanting to maximize their success rate, Jason has the knowledge, experience, and expertise to take you there. I'd like to welcome Jason with Article 4 Rifle Works to the podcast. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you bringing me in and allowing me this platform.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your service. First off, Army Ranger. The guest veteran business before you was also Army Ranger, and can't help but to see that or observe that the Army Rangers do extremely well in their business endeavors.
So my entire family's military. So, going back to prior to World War I, my grandfather, my uncles, my father, my mother, and in fact, I had an uncle of mine who was a colonel and a airborne Catholic priest in the 82nd Airborne during Korea and Vietnam.
Wow.
And in my military career specifically, yes, I was a ranger. I was a schoolhouse ranger during my first year in the military. Then I transferred out of that unit into what is known as the Rapid Deployment Force. So the 18th Airborne Corps, which at the time, my two-star was General Barry McCaffrey, who some people might recognize as the drug czar back for Clinton and some of the other politicians that were president at the time. So pretty storied history with my family, and pretty storied history. I'm very proud of my military service, very proud to be a veteran, and very proud to still continue to work with veterans and sort of tip of the spear professionals within the industry.
That's awesome. That's definitely cool guy stuff. And I always think that a lot of people that didn't serve in the military, and they see, and everyone has their job. Every job is super important in the military, but the percentage of people that are combat arms, and then in that combat arms, these specialized units like the Rangers, like these specialized units, the standards are way higher, and the training tempo is incredibly high.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a minute since I was in the military, but, growing up in a military family and sort of living my life based on some of those military experiences in that training, I still get up at 5 o'clock in the morning every single day. I still have an agenda and a mission that I want to accomplish every single day. And, to get to one of the other points that you mentioned in your introduction from me, I go about that in not only the work that I do professionally, but also the work that I do on the range with precision shooters and with hunters.
That's awesome. Did you go to airborne school?
I did.
What year did you do the airborne school?
Dating myself just a little bit here.
That's but people. So that World's Fair, the tower where they pull you up and then drop you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was in the military in the late 80s. So at that time, you went to basic training at Fort Benning. I went to Harmony Church. And then from basic training, you went to AIT, which is Advanced Infantry Training. And then you went directly to airborne school, got your 5 jumps. And then you went directly to RIP. At the time, it was called RIP, Ranger Indoctrination Program, which now I believe is called RASP. Basically the same program.
I got to learn a little bit about that on the last podcast.
Yep. So that's 30 days of them sort of making sure you want to be there. And then you actually get to go to your unit. So I went to the 1st Ranger Battalion, which was in Hunter Army Airfield in Savannah, Georgia. Worked with that organization for a while, and then was invited down to Fort Stewart, which is the sister base 40 miles down the road from Hunter Army Airfield, because McCaffrey was putting together some specialized units. And that's where a lot of the Rangers, when they decided to transition out of that unit, that's where they would go. So at that time, it took about 2 years to get a slot, to get a tab at Ranger School. So I left before I actually went to get a tab. But I'm what they call a schoolhouse ranger, where I actually got trained in the unit, doing work of a ranger within the unit.
So on-the-job training?
OJT. And Rangers is one of the few sort of tier 1.5 units where you get OJT, where most people think SEALs, Special Forces, and other units, you go through all that training, and then you go to the school, and then you're assigned to the unit. So you actually get certified, tabbed, whatever, if you have the chevron, whatever that may be. At the time, Ranger School was a pretty dedicated school, dedicated to combat arms, dedicated to really train on very specific things, where over time, it's still a fantastic school, and it's still very rigorous and very, very hard, but now it's turned into as much of a leadership school as it has sort of a confirmation or a tab school specifically for Rangers and other combat arms. So still a really highly respected path. I mean, it's still not easy to pass. There are people who flunk out of that on a regular basis. The pass rate is really about leadership. The pass rate is really about, pushing yourself to a limit that you haven't experienced before, and being able to mentally and physically push past that. Because I think one of the things the military teaches you is that we all have the ability to do that. It's whether or not you can sort of crawl inside yourself and find that motivation and crawl out and execute.
So that's definitely I would imagine those skills and experiences through all that, and going into your business now with Article 4 Gun Works or Rifle Works. And then also you're a financial specialist. Is that the right word?
Financial professional.
Financial professional, which you got to have the money to do these fun things. And
well, I mean, I grew up hunting and fishing, and when you join the military, they teach you pretty rigorously how they want you to shoot. I sort of got introduced to longer range experiences when Barry McCaffrey, the unit designated marksman now, is what most units have, which you would call sort of a medium range.
We had M14s,
3 to 5 to 700 yard sort of shooters that can be attached, to forward units. So I never went to a classic sniper school in the military. When I got out of the military after being injured and recovering and doing some other things, I really got immersed in the background and science of long-range shooting. Had an opportunity to work with some organizations that were on the front edge of that, some rifle companies, some barrel companies, really some...
Like R&D, like you're in it with... Like
exactly.
It's not just theory.
It's new technology. It's technology to increase warfighter survivability. It's carbon fiber technology. It's propellant technology. It's bullet technology. And, I'm sort of an obsessive personality. If I find something that's interesting, I'm really not a surface guy. I go all the way in. So I've been all the way in for about 15 years.
And I definitely want that personality that is obsessive about the details to also be looking about my finances.
You would want that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so tell me a little bit more. I'm super fascinated and curious about the Article 4 Rifle Works. Can you go into that a little bit on who you train, what courses you have, and what that looks like?
Right. So Article 4 Rifle Works is a very small niche company that I have. I do probably less than 20 rifles a year. I do a very specific type of rifle for a very specific type of shooter. I don't do a lot of rebarreling. I don't do a lot of, granddad's old gun sort of fixing it up. Yeah. I build what is known in the industry as precision long-range rifles. most people who purchase a rifle from Article 4 Rifle Works, they're hand loaders. They probably have some sort of a precision shooting background. If they don't, they have a rifle and they want to get deeper into the precision shooting.
Yeah.
And they really want the ability to increase their maximum effective range. And the rifles that we build are built on platforms that provide them the opportunity to do that with the right tool.
That's and that's what every shooter, hunter, Lions, I own Lions Head Outfitters and up in Bonners Ferry, and when we first talked, it just was a light bulb how much value that this is, and that you were just talking about, you had a clinic for shooters before, and just that small thing, increasing their success rate, but just increasing your effective range, is because you have the military side and law enforcement and SWAT snipers and stuff, but then even as a hunter, and the more I get into being a conservationist and a hunter, the ethical and the ethical aspect of it, and it's great to have your expertise and to lean into your company and get services from your company. I see, because if you do it yourself, you go down this rabbit hole that it's so much time, it's so much resources. You're going to save so much, even purchasing, and this is my perspective, but I'm sure you see it, testimonials on your clients all the time, that your course might be X amount of dollars to customize a rifle or have a custom rifle, but the money they're saved and the opportunity cost of time saved is and then me knowing that when I shoot that elk at a decent range, that it is an ethical shot. It has the energy behind it, and then going into that.
Yeah, I mean, that's really about I'm not one of those guys. I feel like everyone's ethics are their own. Mm-hmm. Right. So if you're from Pennsylvania and a long shot for you is 200 or 300 yards, or you live out in the middle of Wyoming and a long shot is 900 yards, what we really do is we give people the ability to and the management of their skills. We increase their skills. We teach them both about the science and the art of long range shooting, because there's both. Right, we have these amazing tools in Article 4 Rifle Works. Right, we have all these amazing ballistics calculators. Mm-hmm. We have some of the best components that we've ever had in the history of hunting. What we do is we take all of that together and we put it in a really achievable and absorbable curriculum. And one of our main courses is what we call Precision Hunting 101. The range we use is over at Elk Creek Outfitting in Montana. It's a 1,000-yard range. We do a 2.5-day shooting school where we go through that entire process, and we equip people to have the knowledge to be able to increase their maximum effective range. We usually at least double it.
Wow.
Sometimes more, sometimes a little less. But I think if you polled the students that we've had over the past couple of years, the feedback that we have gotten is their maximum effective range has doubled.
Wow.
And that has allowed them to consider their own personal ethics, I think, in a little bit more of a realistic manner. Mm-hmm. And then it has also given them the ability to really harvest more animals and harvest them what we would think is the right way, right? The best shot that you can make. Mm-hmm. Stuff happens.
Right. Yeah. That's the law, even in military and in hunting. If it can go wrong, it probably will.
Murphy's Law.
Yeah, but having those skills, and that's awesome. I'm just getting excited hearing you talk about this 101 course. Where can someone go and sign up for that? Where can I sign up for this?
Right. So they can either contact me or Elk Creek Outfitting. We have a link on their site mm-hmm. where they can click on that link and they can sign up and fill out the paperwork and pick a class. We do classes once a month throughout the summer. Okay. They're 2.5 days. You arrive on a Friday evening. We welcome you in. Saturday morning, we do the whole science and theory. So it's a classroom portion where we teach everybody really all the vernacular, really how to think about long range and how to think through long range shooting properly. At least we feel like our success rate has shown that we're teaching the right curriculum. And then in the afternoon, we start shooting. So we spend the rest of that afternoon on a range. Mm-hmm. And then generally in that afternoon, we're creating proficiency out to 500 yards. Mm-hmm. Then what we do is we call it a day. We do some fishing. We
Oh my
have some
goodness.
great meals. We do all of those things. We get up the next morning, and then we head back out to the range. We reiterate what we learned the first day. We confirm out to 500, and then we start reaching 6, 7, 8, 9 out to
Steel
1,000
targets?
yards.
Is there steel
targets?
That's so satisfying.
Yep. It's so wonderful to see a guy who showed up and maybe he came in shooting her 200 to 300 yards reliably, and he's hitting a 12-inch, 800-yard gong 4 or 5 times, out of 7 or 8 times, right? Their success rate on hitting it is very, very high. And keep in mind, that's a 12-inch gong, right? So that's a pretty good accomplishment.
That's the what did you call it?
You're inside.
Yeah,
you're
inside the
right around a
vitals.
minute of angle accuracy, right? You're just about a minute and a quarter, which is pretty good accuracy in the field. And then that afternoon, we wrap up the course with a backcountry portion. For about 2 or 3 hours, we walk up the mountain. We have 8 to 12 targets set at various angles, at various distances from 200 to 800 yards. And the guys get to take those skills out into the field and recognize how much their ability can change just based on, hey, the ground's not level, the wind's blowing up the canyon, it's a full value wind blowing up the canyon, but it's a quarter value wind blowing at the target. The angles of how they're shooting, either declination or inclination angles of how they're shooting, changes the trajectory of the bullet. So they learn that while they may be fantastic at hitting that 800-yard target on the range, they might have great success at about 650 in the field, just because a lot of times by the time you're done walking up that hill and your blood pressure is up and the wind's blowing
and then you see that animal in your scope. That reminds me, I had a client. We were sitting in this bowl, and I just didn't like the wind where we were sitting, and we're looking down at this huckleberry patch, and I'm like, I don't like the way, because it's kind of swirling in this bowl. So I'm like, let's walk across this rock slide. So we're going across this rock slide, and we look down, and there's a big black bear eating huckleberries. And it was very difficult, for the client to get a good, stable shooting position. We're on these kind of broken up rocks, shale rocks. So it's unstable, it's wobbly, and it's very important that I believe that section of the course where you take them into the field. That's huge.
It's really just about knowing what your strengths and limitations are. If your limitation is 500 yards, if your limitation is 400, is whatever that number is, get there.
Yeah.
Right? That we're still hunting.
And because then the whole hunting spot of our aspect where, an animal, you can spot it at 1,000, but can you close that distance? Can you stalk in on the animal and set up for a shot? There's so many different. That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that you guys have a portion of that course where you're teaching them. Like, there's a lot more to it than just pulling the trigger and all that.
We take great pride in a guy showing up, never shooting farther than 300 in his life, and in the field hitting a 600-yard gong. We take a lot of pride in that, but we also take a lot of pride in the fact that they're leaving the course with enough knowledge to be able to replicate that activity in whatever their shooting situation is. Wherever they travel, wherever they go, we have them bring their weapon. A lot of shooting schools will use their own weapons, and there's some advantages to that in that they're probably quarter-minute, half-minute guns, right? They're all tuned in, etc. But we really feel it's important for that hunter or shooter. I'm not trying to sell them a rifle at the shooting school. In fact, I've never sold a rifle directly at shooting school. I've sold some rifles afterwards. I've sold a few before.
Yeah.
But the purpose of the school is not to sell a rifle. The purpose of the school is for you to bring your rifle and find out what your limitations and your abilities are with your rifle. Because unless you buy one and you relearn how to use that one, you're bringing the rifle you're going to go hunt with that year. Yeah. More than likely. So learn how to use your rifle.
That's awesome. But yeah, and that goes into another question I wanted to ask. If someone wanted to buy a rifle from you, a custom, how do they go about that?
Yeah, they just need to get a hold of me directly.
Okay.
I really like to get to know the client a lot. We're going to have a really good conversation. As I said, I build about 20 a year. I have some pretty specific clients that I build for on a regular basis. These are the guys that build one every year, sometimes every 2 years.
I need some of those
They're just
hand-me-downs.
fanatics. And, it's also about time and effort and quality. One of the reasons I don't have a big shop, one of the reasons I don't have a lot of people working with me is I'm adamant about quality control, and I am hands-on for the entire process. So I really like and take a lot of pride in the fact that when that rifle goes out the door, it's the best one we can make.
That's awesome. Do you do in the rifle and then the optic, do you have a play in the optic? Is that part of it?
I get a lot of questions about that. In this world of turrets, in this world of, everybody's dialing and, everybody wants the scope with the highest magnification and the best performance. My thing with optics has always been buy a great rifle. Buy the absolute best optics you can possibly afford. The quality of the optics will outperform the quality of the rifle in those kinds of situations. If you have a budget, and most of us do, get yourself a nice rifle. But please go buy the best possible optics that you can and learn how to use it.
What are some of the, if you don't mind, giving your top 3 optics? I know it's hard, but like your top, or you could be top 5, just the ones that you have had good experiences with, and you can.
Well, how about I just say that the best way for me to really give that opinion is based on optics that I've actually gone hands-on with. And I guess maybe I'll rank that from some of the more cost-effective optics that I've ever had to maybe some of those optics that, those guys that buy Bugattis, right? Cost is really no issue.
Yeah.
I've seen guys go to a show and say, okay, I'll take 7, right? Because cost is no issue. I think there's some great U.S. manufacturers. I've been hands-on with Leupold in their Mark V series as well as their VX6 series.
I just bought that this last year.
Fantastic.
And I'll be tapping
optics,
you for.
And they've got a fantastic reputation. Night Force, right down the road here in Idaho, is always going to be a fan favorite. It's certainly one of mine. I think if a guy can go grab a NX8 or an ATACR, they're never going to regret it.
Yeah.
Ever. When we think about premier optics, there's really a lot there. And really where that hits home is the quality of the glass and the ability for that optic to work in the lowest light conditions at optimal clarities, at the best clarities that they can. And for me, those companies are maybe Swarovski. I'm a big Collis fan. I think Collis is probably one of the finest rifle scopes that a guy could put on a rifle. I mean, Schmidt-Bender and some of the other brands out there are, always going to be, I think, perennial favorites. But for most guys, you really have to take into consideration a few things. What can you afford? How much weight do you want to put on your rifle? Because there's always a trade-off.
That is
right.
Yeah, that is very true because you get the extra magnification, and it's 2 pound.
Generally things that are higher quality generally weigh more. If you're taking things like titanium and carbon fiber and all those things out of the picture. So it's really about, where you want to be. I think there's a lot of validity in carrying a 6, 7, 8 pound rifle all in. I think if you're a mountain hunter, if you're a guy that really needs that kind of thing.
It's pretty steep up here.
Man, you got to carry what you can carry. Personally, my rifles are all between 10 and 12 pounds when they're fully kitted.
Is that in your course? Because in my experience in shooting, and you have exponentially more experience than I do, the follow-up shots and seeing your impacts with the heavier rifle. Because when I was shooting a little bit heavier rifle with a Smith & Bender scope, it was just cross-training. And to see that vapor trail is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Now, does that play a role in having the weight behind?
It sure can. I mean, calling your shot, right? So, when you think about professional competition shooters, bench rest shooters, they're running chassis rifles that are pretty heavy, and they're usually running, smaller calibers. 6mm XC, 6mm Dasher, whatever that caliber might be. The 6mm right now seem to be the most popular caliber for the professional shooters. And the reason why is they get fantastic ballistics out of those bullets. The BCs are off the charts. Very little recoil, high recoil manageability, which allows you not only to see impacts but call your shots, and then follow-up shots are very, very fast. The other advantage for carrying a heavy rifle is it's less susceptible to the environment, right? So when we think about the way steel reacts to the environment, changes in temperature, a thicker steel barrel is less apt to have what we call POI shift based on the environment, whether it gets cold or hot when that barrel heats up. Now, generally in most hunting situations, 1 or 2 shots isn't going to make a huge difference in POI shift. We're talking about, variances in temperatures that in hundreds of degrees, multiple shots over threads and strings of shots. But I think the best shot on the planet, if you miss your first shot, is the ability to follow up in the same environment. Now, what does that mean? If you're in a hunting situation and you shoot at 500 yards and you make a bad wind call and you miss that animal, you know from the result of that shot what's taking place in that environment. And the best shot you can make is the quickest you can make that follow-up shot thereafter. So based on seeing that first shot, which is wonderful if you hunt with an outfitter, Lion's Head, Elk Creek, whoever you hunt with, that's that guide's job, right? If they're able to help you with that and say, hey, we're 2 inches left and low, wherever that shot went, that's your ability to immediately correct that shot. And the faster that you can do that, and sometimes heavier rifles help you do that, the better chance you have of making a great shot with the follow-up.
That's awesome. Can you talk about the clinic that you provide for outfitters or for?
Yeah. So, one of the things that we found in working with outfitters over the year is there's a gap that we found between the actual guide or the outfitter's ability to manage the client in the actual shooting cycle in the field. They're fantastic at archery, right? So usually when the archery hunters show up, that guide or that outfitter will go with their archery hunter and they'll see what their maximum effective range is. They'll see how they shoot. And that results in their, what they need to do in the field. They either need to get that client within 50 yards with that bow. They need to get that bull called in, at 40 or 50 yards and get him a good broadside shot. What we found is the best relationship, the best success rate that happens with a guide and a hunter in the field is when they go through that same process. Finding out what that hunter's capability is. That gives the guide the ability to get the hunter there. And that's where we really stress that hunters be honest. If you tell your guide you can shoot 600 yards reliably, and they get you to 600 yards, right, that's the opportunity to make it happen or not.
It is the worst feeling as a guide, and it's more that you feel the empathy for the client is the big one, but when they miss, and it's just the worst. So that is it. Your service to me is just so priceless that to avoid that feeling of just.
Well, let's remind. The hunter doesn't want to miss. The guide doesn't want you to miss. So I guess to circle back is just be honest about what your abilities are, and be honest with yourself first and foremost. But really, to help ensure the success of your hunt, be honest with your guide. If it's 350, let your guide get you to 350. These guys know what they're doing. They know the terrain. They know where they're hunting. Let them get you there.
Yeah. And then you have the aspect, too, is what you're good on a range and what you are in a scenario, a hunting scenario in real world. It was taught in military and in shooting courses that what your group is in a range, in a life and death situation. I know hunting's not that, but sometimes when that bull comes screaming in, that adrenaline kicks in and it's just thrashing, your heart rate's up. So it's your effective range,
It still does that for me. And I hope it never ends.
That's the best part. And
the thing that we generally say is a guideline. It's not a rule. We say, generally, if you're really comfortable at the range at any given distance, your range in the field is usually anywhere from 10 to 20% less. So if you're hitting 500 yards on the range, like it's old school, your range in the field is probably 425, 450.
And sometimes they're moving, stopping, and
yeah,
that's really cool. Well, I'm definitely going to take advantage of your services, and I'm excited to see clients, my real estate clients, and then also my hunting guided clients, seeing them with a smile on their face when they have that.
It's the best part of my job. When I get a guy, like a couple guys last year sent me photographs, through text message. Hey, I shot this. One guy shot a 194-inch buck, in northwest Montana, after taking a half-day clinic before the shooting, before the hunting season starts. So that's the other thing we do is for bear season this year, we're giving some of those clients the option to come in a day early and doing a half-day clinic. So we get their rifle all sighted in.
Mm-hmm.
We chronograph it for them. We do a little bit of work on the range, see how comfortable they are with their shooting positions, giving any coaching that we can.
Mm-hmm.
And then we give them dope in the field out to what we feel like is a really realistic range for them, so that they can arrive and be sure, because I can't tell you, and no fault being projected here at all, but I can tell you there have been many, many times where I've showed up at camp on Friday night, and a guy gets off the plane from wherever state they came in.
Yeah.
They show up at the range and they're sighting in their rifle and they just can't figure out why they're not hitting. And I ask them just a couple of questions. One of those questions being, hey, I see you using some dope there. I see you using some holdover. Where are you getting your data? Well, off the box. Right?
Shame on me.
It's going to be close. And at most normal ranges, if the box says, hey, my 6.5 PRC is shooting this 147 grain bullet at, 2950, call it.
Yeah.
That's a test rifle. That's a test rifle at the factory. That doesn't necessarily cross right over to your rifle. And it certainly doesn't equate to the same velocity in the environment that you're in. You might be at sea level. You might be at 7,000 feet.
What's the elevation at this outfitter?
I think they're right about, at base camp, they're about 3,000 feet.
Okay. And hunting maybe around 5,500?
Well, they have a high camp. So they have a horseback high camp that's up above 5,000. And I know there's some areas that they go into which is probably even higher than that.
Okay.
So it can change even based on that. Look, in my opinion and in my experience, for me, the long-range world starts at about 500 yards. Most modern calibers have pretty similar dope.
Yeah.
Dope is DOPE, data on previous engagements. So that's where the military term came from it back in the day when everybody had a book, right?
Yeah.
And you had to do it, you had to shoot it, pardon my French. Most modern calibers have very similar dope within a few inches, out to about 500 yards. And then from 500 on, that's when you start seeing the real variances. That's when you start seeing the real separation of those calibers, those bullets, the ballistic coefficients, and everything else. And the last thing I'll share with that is, when we think about how hard it gets, if you're thinking about shooting at 400 yards and then you're going, okay, I'm going to shoot out to 800, man, that's got to be twice as hard. It's about 10 times as hard. There's so much more at play.
Yeah.
That it's not just twice as hard, it's 10 times as hard to do it correctly anyway.
Yeah, and that's why you need to hire a professional to get to that next level. I definitely highly encourage everyone, we get a lot of people that listen to this podcast, reach out to you, look into these courses, because I know I am. So they're going to fill up fast. And, but I also want to say I appreciate your service and the stuff that you're doing, for, not just, the veteran community, but also the outdoor community, because, I noticed within almost just the veteran community overlaps a lot with the outdoor community, and helping, the outfitter and helping, other people like that is super important. And I appreciate you doing that and coming on the podcast and sharing all this information, means a lot. So I appreciate you coming on.
I appreciate the invite, and I hope some folks found some value in some of the topics we talked about.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where, I try to keep my mouth shut as much as possible, because then I don't want to reveal how little I know about the subject.
But look, we all started somewhere,
right?
We weren't born with this knowledge, and it's just like anything else we do. Yeah. I remember, I'll leave you with a story. I took a run at playing golf as a golf pro years ago. And I remember being at the DPC at Scottsdale. And I was watching Phil Mickelson and Billy Andrade and Tom Lehman back there practicing. And I found it so interesting because there was a half-hour period where Phil didn't change a club. He sat there and banged 8 irons for 30 minutes. So when he was leaving, he actually looked over, because Phil's pretty interactive. I don't know him personally. He's just pretty interactive.
Yeah.
And he said, "Did you learn anything?" And I said, "No, I don't know what I learned. I just was in awe that, every shot looked the same, and you just looked so effortless in doing it." And he said to me, "Well, that's the difference between an amateur golfer and a professional golfer." And this is something I've always kept with me in everything that I do moving forward. And he said, "An amateur golfer will practice it until they get it right. A professional will practice it until they can't possibly get it wrong." So
yeah.
That's the way I think about, what I try to do in the shooting community. It's what I think about when I try to, interact with clients as a financial professional. Get to know them, get to know their passions, and, develop a way that, the value that I can provide gives them the ability to, chase those passions at a higher level.
That's awesome. Well, that great story, and I appreciate you sharing that, and looking forward to spending some more time with you around rifles. So
Thanks,
awesome.
Mike.
Well, thanks, Jason.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on.
Yep.
Great day.